Mr. Chairman. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you for your service to our nation. Mr. Secretary, as you know, I've been working with my Virginia colleagues to ensure that key strategic decisions are answered and that we're really spending our resources properly, specifically with regard to moving a carrier to Mayport. And we've asked repeatedly from your department about issues and information related to cost and strategic necessity, and we appreciate you giving us that information back. According to an article yesterday in the Jacksonville Press, Senator Nelson is quoted as saying, "The Secretary of Defense looked me in the eyes 2.5 months ago and said, 'You don't have anything to worry about.'" Furthermore, the leaked copy of the QDR we saw in December didn't specifically mention Mayport, but the final version of the QDR, we see that Mayport is specifically mentioned as a home porting for another carrier. Mr. Secretary, can you verify Senator Nelson's comments in the press yesterday, and can you give us an idea about why there was a last-minute change in the content of the QDR?
Well, first of all, I don't remember those exact words, but I have known for some period of time, since we were early into the budget process, the priority that the Navy attaches to the strategic dispersion and the continued priority that they attach to having a carrier at Mayport. And I pressed them very hard in the meetings. You know, you have limited resources. Is this how you want to spend your money? Do you think this is more important than other things, other Navy needs? And both the Secretary of the Navy and the Chairman, the CNO, said yes. So I have no reason to doubt that I gave Senator Nelson that kind of assurance based on the Navy's own assessment of their priorities. I was unaware that the draft of the QDR on that issue had changed between an earlier draft in December and the final draft.
Okay. Admiral Mullen, you had spoken earlier about the strategic dispersal plan, and Mr. Secretary, you had spoken earlier about realism with risk and resources, and I think that's absolutely applicable in this particular situation. When you talk about strategic dispersal plan, there are only two areas that I've heard strategic dispersal talked about is in the Congressional Research Service report and then in the EIS. Can you tell me, is there a specific quantification of risk in either of those two documents?
Actually, I don't know. I'll repeat what I said earlier. I think the stakes are so exceptionally high because of the criticality of these capital shifts, and that and then getting it wrong, it costs us an extraordinary amount. I also certainly understand the investment issue. I mean, at the same time, it's oftentimes, from my perspective, too easy to just play off one investment versus another. This is a total capability, total portfolio, and it's part of the strategic view of where I believe we have to place our assets. And for lots of reasons, I think that dispersion is important. Has been so in the past on the West Coast, even on the East Coast. Kennedy was down there, as you know, non-nuclear, and it is now as well.
Another question: if we truly are going to represent realism with risk and resources, shouldn't we have some tangible quantification of the risk associated with carriers being based where they are there in Norfolk, and then looking at that particular risk and then the cost associated with moving those carriers down there? If we do want to represent that realism, it seems like to me we ought to have that grounding in an objective measure of risk.
I spent a lot of time on risk, and two thoughts. One is quantification is very difficult. That said, I'd be happy to go see what work has been done and see where we are, where we could be. Oftentimes the risk assessments that I get involved in strategically, there is a judgment factor that is there, and it goes back to what we talked about earlier, which is predictability or unpredictability about the future and all those kinds of things. And I am one that has rarely thought that we should put all our eggs in one basket, and that's a risk factor for me. So I'll go back and see if there's a way to do that. I'm not extremely positive that I can give you a number specifically.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.